I was planning to open this monologue with an alien reference about not being able to hear people scream in space, but I already used it up in the Mass Effect podcast. Instead, I will say in Dead Space, all you will do is scream. And probably poop your pants. In this, our first Halloween special episode, I am joined by newcomer and in real life friend Aldo, as well as returning guests and also in real life friends Frank and Mike B. We spend the evening discussing what makes Dead Space work, what got lost in the sequels, its sci-fi and horror inspirations, while also exploring the dark crevices of Aldo's humor, which is where the true horror lies. Enjoy, and I'll be back at the end of the show. What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Obsessive Compulsive Gamer Podcast. I'm here with a new guest today. He is right above me. If you please introduce yourself, sir.
Hello, my name is Aldo. First time here, first time actually doing anything like this, so it's kind of strange. But I'm here with good people I know well, so I'm very comfortable.
So just like my two returning guests, Aldo is an in real life friend of ours. So we all know each other personally. We've hung out a lot, and we know has a love of games. And really, the real reason why I wanted him is because of his humor, because it is whack.
I mean, I was gonna try to tone it down a bit, but okay.
No, don't.
If you want that, that's fine.
We want you on here because we want the full Aldo experience. That's
Okay.
the whole point here.
That's going to be Aldo's shirt. Just get a shirt that says whack.
It's very situational, the type of comedy. So we'll see.
Yeah, it depends. I don't know how well it'll work for Dead Space. We'll see how it goes. Oh, by the way, we're talking about Dead Space today.
There you go.
And then we have returning with us Mike B.
What's up?
And then, of course, our good friend Frank, also known as War Has Begun. He's here with us tonight as well.
Howdy, howdy.
So we are here to discuss with everyone the topic of Dead Space. It is a very well-known... I'm not going to call it survival horror because that is going to be one of the questions we talk about today about the debate about whether it is survival horror. But it is a hard influence game. It deals with the main character of Isaac Clarke, who is on the Ishimura. What kind of ship is it? It's like a tugboat type ship, right? It's supposed to tow in the... I was going to call it the Nostromo, and that's alien.
It's like a planet cracking egg or something.
It's Nostromo inspired. I tell you that much.
Right. So anyway, they go to investigate a ship that's not providing any response, and it turns out there's these nasty alien, half dead or full dead life forms going around and having destroyed everything. You guys know what Dead Space is, and I'm sure the audience does as well. Why else would they be watching this?
The 2020 United States. I get it.
There you go. Yeah, it's 2020 United States. So, all of us in here have had a chance to play several games in the series. There are several games, but there's also a lot of media in the games that go beyond the game themselves. We're talking about comic books, movies, and then Frank, you mentioned there's also novelizations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we are going to talk about all these topics as well as what it is about the games that we love. So let's go ahead and get rolling into this. And what I would like to know, and we'll start with you, Aldo, since you're our new guest. What was your first experience with Dead Space?
First experience with Dead Space was the first game on the PS3. But I probably played it about close to a year or two after it was released. But I always tend to wait till like games come out and then wait till they're like bargain bin, like used game type of buys, and I pick them up. But it was always one of the games that was on my radar, and that was like my first experience with it. And despite its its controls and it's like trying to control while like combat at the same time, I found it very difficult. But the game was it just kept my interest the entire time. I loved it. That was my first experience though, was on the PS3.
Nice. How about you, Mike?
Oh, mine was on the 360, and if I remember correctly, I think I rented it, and I just kind of played through it, and I was really, really excited about it. So then, of course, always kind of limited on money stuff. It was kind of one of the things where I kind of waited for like those platinum hits on 360, which I believe it didn't take that long to get there, right? Because it was such a hit that the sales kind of just maxed out right away when it sold. Because wasn't there like it kind of sold 2 million copies, right? if I remember correctly.
I think it's still more than that.
More than that, and then
mhm.
so I think it reached its peak on high sales, and I remember it going to the platinums pretty quick. I don't really know the time gap, but as soon as it hit the greatest hits, though, I grabbed it on the 360 so I could play through it again.
Very cool. And this was the original Dead Space, right?
Yes, the original one.
All right. How about you, Frank?
Actually, same experience. I was actually deployed to Iraq when it came out, so I didn't get to pick it up until I think close to a year after it got released. And I remember seeing the screenshots for it, and it was in a Game Informer, funnily enough, where they were talking about this horror game that was inspired by Aliens, Event Horizon, The Thing, and Silent Hill. And I was like, well, shit, I love all that. So I was looking forward to it, but I kind of forgot about it because I wasn't here, you know? So as soon as I came back, I bought a 360 and I picked up that game, you know, along with a few others. And that's how I beat it the first time, was on 360. That's one of the only 100% games I've ever 100%ed on both 360 and PS3. And
when you say 100%, you're talking about achievements as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I 100%ed it on 360 and then on PS3. And I have yet to do it on PC, but I've only recently started playing it there. So.
Can I ask a quick question
Sure.
for Frank? How did you feel the difference between the 360 and the PS3? Like performances, glitch issues, anything like that?
I didn't really notice a huge difference. I would say that performance-wise, I think it did perform a little bit better on the 360, though. Like the load time just seemed a little bit quicker, and the controls were slightly more responsive. But it wasn't enough to where, you know, I was like, no, I'm not going to play it on 3, and on PS3 is terrible. You know, like, because, you know, sometimes that conversation, like, to me, it gets ridiculous. Yeah. Like, I played Bayonetta only on PS3, and everybody's like, oh, it's the garbage version, and 360 is the best. And I'm like, I really didn't see a lot of the issues that they had with screen tearing and frame rate drops. And if there were, they weren't that significant.
It's like I still beat the game.
Yeah, exactly. And it was common for games at the time. It just everything just ran better on 360 just because of the way it was designed. And like it depends on like who was making the game and how much time they spent working on PS3 games, you know.
But just to throw it out there, since you're starting the PC gaming, it does look really fucking amazing on PC. But you know, that's just the natural high resolution and your frame rates that you could boost. So it looked fucking great on that. I love it on.
Well, it does now. I remember when it first released, it had a lot of issues, especially with the control scheme.
Yeah. It was really bad.
Even the default control scheme does not work well with the keyboard, mouse, or the controller. Like I literally had to download a patch to get it the mouse movement to work the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, they were saying it gets stuck with the frame rate, your mouse movement, so then it's harder to like quick move or something like that on the PC.
Yeah, it sucks. Like I remember, it didn't feel precise at all. It felt like I was playing a game on ice. You know, like I'd move, but I'd stop moving, or I'd stop holding forward, and I would still keep moving a little bit more, and I'm like, what the fuck?
But even on PC, I still plug in a controller. I haven't really fucked with the mouse and keyboard with the PC version. I still use like a 360.
So, not that I want to pull away from this type of questioning, but we'll get into this more details about these aspects of the game. Just really quick to share my experience. My actual first experience with Dead Space was with actually the first animated movie that released.
Oh wow!
So it was back when I was initially hanging out with Gino and Manny and Ryan when that one came out, because Dead Space came out 2007, 2008, right? 2008. So then the animation had come out, and I had watched the animation with them, and you know, I had heard about the game, but I didn't know much about it. And so watching the animation made me want to watch the game, and of course, then I played it on 360 like you guys did, and it was great. It was a fantastic experience. So I loved it as well. But now let's go down to what exactly have you experienced in the series as a whole? What games have you played? What films have you watched? What comics have you read? What books have you read, if any of those things? So, who would like to go first? Who wants to go share their experiences?
I can go.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I can say, because I think I probably consume the most media. I've of course played the trilogy, all 3 games. I watched the first movie. I never watched the second one. The first movie is a prequel to the game, which has kind of like a lot of issues because there are some like inconsistencies, and that's always an issue whenever you do a prequel after you establish something. The second movie, I know it's a prequel to 2, and it follows Neil Strauss and like how he kind of loses his mind. I never watched it though. Did anybody watch that one?
I watched that
Yeah,
one.
I've
That's
seen
the
that.
Aftermath, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Aftermath.
The animation is just so hard to look at, that 3D animation.
Well, it's different because there's different stories. It's more like like an anthology, I guess.
Yeah.
So
But
the animation
3D
changes.
animation but the 3D animation is like what's leading to all of it.
Right.
Each time it breaks off.
Yeah, that's the
that's
connecting story.
Yeah, and it's like so hard to look at. It's like early Pixar when they first started, before they even became Pixar animation. It's just very, very, very ugly.
Yeah, it's obviously they didn't have a lot of budget in it. I mean, it's definitely the weaker of the two animations, and it shows.
Like those Transformers Beast Wars shows.
Hey,
Nah,
you don't
those
talk
are-
about
those are
Beast
better.
Wars that way.
I was waiting to get a rise from at least one person.
Maybe more like reboot.
Yeah, there we
Oh,
go.
man.
Or what was the other one? There's another one, wasn't there? Wasn't there a VR TV show?
That's
They're
reboot,
VR
right?
troopers.
No.
VR
No,
Trooper.
I'll look it up.
That was Johnny Mnemonic.
Oh man, how about you, Aldo? What have you played or read or watched?
I played all the 3 main games. I played that rail shooter one that was on the Wii.
Mhm.
I like how you guys didn't let me finish, but okay.
Okay, go. No,
Well,
let Frank
that's
finish.
what happens when you take your big pauses, man.
Go, let Frank finish. I think because everyone interrupted him. That's why.
No, it's because I had asked a question about the
Oh.
movies. That's why. No, it's cool. Like,
Okay.
no,
But like,
go
yeah, mine's real quick. But like, yeah, the three main games, that rail shooter one on the Wii, which I thought was really fun, but it was whatever. And the first animated movie, I saw that one and I enjoyed that one just mainly because of just the one scene, the guy with like that plasma saw thing that just chopping everyone chopping everything to pieces. That made me roll on the floor in laughter. I love shit like that. So.
This is why we brought Aldo on board.
But mostly like none of the books are comic, the novels are comics or anything. And I think Barriga's on the same boat with me, where just can't stand reading. So
So that first movie is called Downfall, right?
Yes.
And then what was the name of the
That's
game on the Wii?
Extinction or
Extraction.
Extraction.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Extraction.
Okay. So
it was
Mike,
a fun little rail shooter.
it was. Mike, have you played all of those games or watched the movies?
I've played 1 and 2, which I really enjoy a lot. Extraction, I own it. I finally got a copy of it on the Wii. It kind of has like a deep scratch, so when I started like the first stage, it like fucked up towards the end, and I was like, God damn it! So I haven't had a chance to really play it, but I really want to. And what I played so far, it seems really cool because I kind of like the on-rail shooter stuff anyway, from like House of the Dead and that Resident Evil Chronicles. So like that, just Dead Space like that is really cool. So I like, really need to get that fixed or whatever so I could play it. I've seen both movies. I didn't like Aftermath. Downfall is actually really, really, really cool. I like that one a lot. The animation was really great. The sound effects were cool in that movie. The story was kind of like on a good pace to where it doesn't get boring like most like animated style movies get to sometimes. And what was the last thing I was gonna say? Yeah, I don't like reading the books. I don't want to read them.
I don't like the book.
Not even the comic books?
I actually honestly didn't know there was comic books of it.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah, there are a few.
All right,
How about you,
Frank.
Bobby?
So, I thought we were going to finish with you.
Well, I can actually say real quick, I did play 5 minutes or 10 minutes of part 3, and just, I don't know, just how the game felt the moment I turned it on, I was like, I don't want to play this game. So then I never put it back on. So I don't know I don't even know how the actual story ends from like this whole trilogy stuff. So, oh well.
You know what? Neither do I, and I actually finished the original release of Dead Space 3 because I never played the Awaken DLC, which has the ending, of course, because you're playing as both Isaac Clarke and Carver. I don't remember what his first name is, but
John.
Carver.
Yeah,
John Carver.
I have no idea who you're talking about. Who's Carver?
The second game had a DLC too. I forgot about that, so I played that one as well.
What was the DLC for the second game?
Or was I think it was the second game. I remember there being like an Asian character in it, but I don't. Man, I forgot what it was called. I could have sworn it had a DLC.
Did any of you guys play the multiplayer
does.
version?
No. Never.
No, it wasn't multiplayer. It was a single player like DLC.
Did you try the multiplayer?
No,
Well,
I don't play online.
Well, Frank and I are playing the co-op on PC right now. We haven't had a chance to play it recently. We haven't finished it, but we're almost there. But
How is the co-op in that?
actually, I really like it. I think it's a lot of fun. What's neat is like, so it doesn't compare it to the original games and atmosphere because it is definitely more action oriented. But what's cool is there are scenes where like my character Carver experiences hallucinations from his past, and while I'm seeing him, Frank's character, he can't see him on his screen. So it's cool where I have shit happening and he doesn't. Like there's this one area where we're running around. I said, why is there all these presents everywhere and happy birthday signs and shit? Like Frank's like, what are you talking about? There's nothing in this room. It's just a,
Why are you spazzing out, man?
Yeah. He's like, why are you freaking out, man? So there's some cool stuff done like that, but gameplay wise, it pretty much plays like just an action co-op game. So it doesn't like the things that make Dead Space great, we'll talk about in a little bit, aren't there for 3. Not to say 3 is a bad game, it's just not what we wanted from a Dead Space game. But as far as the things that I've played, I've played 1, I played through halfway through 2, and then my save file got corrupted on my PS3 and I never went back to restart it. I might restart it on the PC one of these days since I have it on there now. And then 3, I'm playing through Frank. What's up?
No, I was going to say, honestly, you really need to play 2 on PC because it looks beautiful. It's aged so well, and the controls, I guess they learned from the first game, they're really tight, and they are, I mean, honestly, I think gameplay-wise, 2 is the best. But we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in more detail in a little bit. I've seen both the movies, never read any of the comics or any of the books either, so that stuff is nothing to me. And I did play Extraction all the way through on the Wii because I was one of those Wii supporters that's like, oh, you're going to release a lower version on the Wii? I'm going to buy it and play it and then tell everybody it's great, even though sometimes it's pretty awful. Like like with the Ghostbusters game or like with the...
I enjoyed Wii games because of how bad they look.
Well, I like the Ghostbusters art style because they're kind of going with the cartoon a little bit. But like the one that was terrible was the... what the hell is the name of the zombie game on 360 with Frank West?
Dead Rising.
Dead Rising. Yeah, that shot till you drop was terrible on the Wii. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. So
yeah, how many zombies can you render? Like 20?
Yeah. Well, Extraction, I think it wasn't ported to the PS3 initially. It came out with a limited edition of 2, and there was also another game that was packaged with 2 called Dead Space Ignition, and it's a prequel where it's also a puzzle game. Like that's all it is. It just has these comic stills of what's happening on Titan Station or the Sprawl. I forgot what it's called, and you just it's like some engineer who's like fixing stuff, and that's kind of like where the puzzle element comes in. But then of course, all hell breaks loose, and I never finished that one because I got stuck on a puzzle pretty deep into the game. So I need to go back and finish that one. Extraction, I played it both on the Wii and on the PS3. Honestly, I mean, play it on either or. I think the PS3 is better just because it looks better. They play about the same. One thing I will say though is that considering how good, I mean, I think the voice acting is pretty good in all 3 games. But then you play Extraction.
Yeah, it's not much. Not that much attention was paid to detail there.
Yeah, it's like, like in the first level, you blow this guy's head off, and a character pukes.
Oh, his head off. Okay.
This is what you're gonna get.
Wrong game.
He's coming back, guys. Every time.
No, you're thinking of Deep Space, the porn knockoff.
Oh, okay.
Or
Glory hole
where you
station.
just blow his head.
Glory hole station.
Glory hole station.
But this guy's puking on the side, and then you kill a couple more people, and you're like, I had to kill them. I had to. It's like, are you sure? Did you really have to? Did you have to do anything with the amount of Oh yeah, it's just so bad with the voice acting, but
it's like those old school House of the Deads or something.
Not quite to that extent.
Pretty much.
Because at least the old school House of the Deads are charming in their bad voiceovers.
Thank you for saving me.
No, I think there was more inflection then too. I will say the female voice actors in Extraction are better than the male. Like they gave a shit at least a little more.
Maybe that better direction.
I actually have the first graphic novel that they came out with. I've never read it, so I'm not even sure what it's about. But I know that one of the graphics was called Salvage, and it's a prequel. It's a prequel to 3 based on Carver. And then there were 3 or 4 novels. I know one of them is called Martyr, and I think that's actually the origin of unitology. It follows Altman. And it's funny because he's actually a reluctant martyr, so to speak, because he didn't want any of this shit. He didn't want to be recognized because he's just like, what, this is awful. And of course he ends up they Joseph Smithed him. So yeah, there's quite a bit of media. That's one thing I will give EA is that they really wanted to put a lot of effort and build this not just into a game series, but into a franchise.
Well, it's interesting that they did it so early with 1 because it was an unproven product. Horror games at the time weren't very popular, or at least there wasn't anything that released that was super popular really since. There's
Resident Evil 4?
And then there's going to be a lot of debate over Resident Evil 4 because there's a lot of Resident Evil fans that don't consider 4, a true Resident Evil game in the sense of 1, 2, and 3. They consider more action oriented, which it is, but I still think it has a lot of horror elements that still make it a Resident Evil game. But anyway, but the point is those games weren't as popular as they had been, and Dead Space brought back horror elements that a lot of horror games, especially earlier horror games, tried to do, but really didn't have the graphical ability to do. And finally, a lot of that horrific imagery could finally be realized in a 3D space with a lot of detail, and it was pretty damn terrifying. I mean, walking down those barely lit corridors or having flickering lights. Like the one thing that stands out in the game graphically is the lighting. Like that lighting system is still incredible. It's obvious that graphically they played it safe because they were trying to build atmosphere, and you don't need super detailed graphics to do that. What you need to have the proper lighting. You have to have the proper sound. Like the sound quality in that game is also incredible. That's part of the reason why I still think we can go and play them without any problems, because you have incredible lighting. And even though the character models themselves might be simple, because you have these necromorphs which have these very odd shapes, like they're humanoid, but then it's like the whole Lovecraftian thing where they're human but not. And that's what makes it even more terrifying. And then of course again the lighting and the audio effects, and that's what makes them such great games, especially those first 2. But the other thing I want to establish was just for the audience out there, especially, hey, Whiskey, that's Aldo's cat.
Stepping on the keyboard here.
He's like, hey,
baby girl. Baby girl.
So
here's your 5 minutes of fame.
the first movie, Downfall, and the prequel game Extraction kind of take place simultaneously, right? Because Extraction is about what happens on the planet after they turn on the what is it called? I was going to say beacon. It's not a beacon. What do they call them?
Oh,
marker. And then the movie is what takes place on the station, right? And then the first game on Ishimura, right? And then the first game is the one that takes place with Clarke, so that's Clarke's story. And then you have the second movie, which is a prequel to the second game, right?
Yeah.
And then also the Ignition, Was it a prequel, Frank? Do you know, or was it along with Dead Space 2?
No, I'm pretty sure it's a prequel.
Okay, he's going to check on that.
Yeah, I'm checking on it.
And then, of course, we had Dead Space 3. There is no other movie or anything else. Now, as far as the comics and the books are concerned, I don't know, except for Frank had mentioned Martyr. I don't know anything about when any of the comics were released or how they play in. But
where does Extraction place in?
It's a prequel to the first game. It takes place on the planet when the marker's activated. So the movie shows what happens on the Ishimura, while the game Extraction shows what happens on the planet. So so at least you have that timeline. But as far as the mainline series, all those are based on Isaac Clarke's character. He's the main character in all three of those games, and that's where he's been from that point. So, Frank, were you going to add anything else before we move on to the next part?
Yeah, just really quick. Okay, so Dead Space Ignition, it is a prequel, and you actually see the lead up to where Franco at the beginning of the second game goes and wakes up Isaac Clarke and hey, you got to get out of here. And then there is the DLC. There is the DLC. It's called Severed for Dead Space 2. Aldo. And that I've never played right now. I totally forgot that it existed because even though I have Dead Space 2 on every version, that was never included with anything, which really kind of sucks.
I think you play as one of the characters from Extraction in that one, if I recall.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. But I think that's pretty much it so far.
All right. So that's Dead Space timeline that we know of in a nutshell. We do not pretend to be experts here. We just do the best that we can.
Far from it.
Yeah, very far from it. So our next question goes into some of the stuff we were talking about. So what artistic aspects and mechanics do you think helped make Dead Space stand out from other games? Think about in terms of how did it improve from game to game. More importantly, how did it improve compared to existing horror games at the time and stuff that inspired it?
I guess I'll go for this one. Well, specifically to me, especially the first game, because the first game is still my favorite in the series. It's so damn claustrophobic. It is it's nothing but pure darkness. Corridors are just tight everywhere. I mean, it's exactly what you would imagine actual space type tugboat or freighter would be. It's basically not meant to be accommodate your comfort or anything. It's meant to do its job, and it captures that the design element in that aspect. It captures it almost perfectly, and it's one of the things where a lot of games where you can just things get tense, you could pause and you could rearrange things. Couldn't really do that with that first Dead Space. Kind of had to find a quiet little corner somewhere to you're not gonna get bothered or touched or anything. And even then, during those moments, you're still nervous. But yeah, I think that's what it brings really to that type of genre of game is the especially the first game is just it's claustrophobic, and that's what frightened me the most about the first Dead Space. 2 and 3 I felt were way more action oriented type games. 2 was a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, but I missed Isaac Clarke shutting the hell up for one. I love that he didn't say a damn word in the first game. Where you kind of like Gordon Freeman. You kind of the character is you. You're Isaac Clarke in a way. It was real cool. But yeah, that's what I always thought. I always liked about it was just all its design elements of actually being in space and stuff.
So, how do you think having Isaac Clarke how do you think them giving him a voice in part 2 takes away from Isaac Clarke himself?
You're not that character anymore. I mean, that was the big difference. Is the first game where you were Isaac Clarke, and then as soon as the second game comes around, he's oh, well, he's got a personality, and his personality is not my personality. He's this guy's brave. I was I can't.
Cuts that immersion, doesn't it? Right there,
this guy's got the dick and balls. I just got the dick, and it's he's not me. Like I'd be so frightened in those situations. You know, I'd be like, no, I'll be the guy on the radio telling you what to go do. I'll hang back. You know, like it's like you go from point A to point B. I'll hang back and just monitor your movement.
So then, why do you think Visceral decided to give him a voice in the second game? Do you think they had a purpose that they just couldn't work out? Do you think it may have been forced by EA? What do you think their goal was by giving him a voice?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's exactly. I think it was something that was like forced by EA. They just wanted like a more marketable type character, you know, probably instead like just I mean like instead of just like there's a character without a voice. They wanted someone that they could like put into like other things. Like they have market. They just wanted to make a marketable character. You know, maybe give him like a personality that can attract to certain people that will be like, oh, I want his action figure because he's so cool in this game. You know, I don't know, but that's why I don't make the big decisions. Like I said, I kept them quiet the whole time.
What about you guys? What do you guys think about Isaac Clarke being given a voice in the sequel? What do you prefer?
No voice. Silent protagonist
Is cooler?
Yeah,
How about you, Frank?
It's like Aldo was saying though, it cuts that immersion that you have with that character. You know, like it's kind of like you forget. You just think Isaac Clarke and that's it, and then like you are perceiving yourself through that world. You know, you feel like you're making the decisions for him, and you just have Isaac's name. You know.
Yeah. Well, I actually saw it more as like an evolution. Like I did prefer him being silent, but I saw it as an evolution because in the first game, when you look at your mission objectives, you have his thoughts. He does say, you know, like, oh, I really need to get this fixed because, you know, I need to get to Nicole, or, you know, like, oh man, if we don't get this online, then we're going to be without oxygen and we're going to be screwed, you know? So you do have some introspection into the character. But yeah, I think it's actually more aligned to the kind of thoughts that you would have if you're in that situation as opposed to Isaac Clarke himself. And when he did get the voice in the second game, there were some drawbacks to it, but because, you know, it's a sequel, it's going to be bigger, it's going to be better, quote unquote, which in a lot of ways it was, as far as like gameplay elements, graphics, enemy design. I actually think they took a step back, but that's just me. So him having a voice, it was also kind of cool though, because you did have that strong character, and honestly, considering everything that he went through and he survived it, it made kind of sense, especially since he was suffering from the PTSD in the second game. But at the same time, having that PTSD, he's still trucking on, you know, like this dick and balls guy. So, you know, but
I'm glad I coined a new term, dick and balls guy.
So yeah, but you know, to me, it's more been about, you know, that universe itself. Like it is Isaac's story, but just seeing everything in that universe is so incredible. You know, like Aldo said with the first game, it's function versus form, which is exactly what a space freighter, you know, this industrial, huge, just meant to gather resources. You know, it's like, it's going to be rough. It's going to be put together. You know, you're not going to see all these like pretty painted walls. It's going to be iron, steel, and fucking, you know, this lack of humanity.
It's fucking metal.
Another thing I think it did really, really well compared to previous games is that it was believable in the sense that what you were fighting with were all these tools. You know, you're using these, you know, these ripper saws, you're using flamethrowers, using things that you would find on an industrial freighter. And being a combat, well, he wasn't even a combat engineer, but he kind of de facto became one. He put all those tools to use. You know, he knew how to fix all that stuff. So it made sense for the character and for the story. You know, the implementation of the 0Gs, the kinesis, the stasis, like They got the design down so well in that first game. Honestly, if they had given us an exact clone on the Sprawl, I would have been just as happy, you know?
Yeah.
Well, the thing I like the most on that is that immersion that there's no HUD. Like his health is the meter on his back, your oxygen tanks on the back. So there's actually never really a HUD the whole time. And your ammo is basically what's left of your tools. So it has
And
like
what you can see
it's
on the weapon.
gun. Yeah. So that's how you see everything. And the only time you ever go through a menu is when he's actually going to like a tool bench shop or a tool bench to work on it.
Well, and his inventory.
Yeah, and the inventory. But like other than that, there's no need to really, what's my health and everything like that, you know? And that really like put into the immersion like a lot, I thought, you know?
Yeah, because like you said, the screen's very clear. It's not cluttered with any information at all. And then I think the one thing they did do better in the first one, and I'm like Aldo, I think the first one is probably still my favorite because of all the things that he had mentioned. But when you speak to other characters in the game, when you come up on your comms, they're actually full 3D animated characters, right? They're animated models. But in the sequel game, they used pre-rendered scenes. So when they come up on there, they don't look as good as they do in the first game because they're pre-rendered as opposed to the fully featured 3D models. That's probably one of the few things that I saw and went, oh, that doesn't look as good. The other thing that I would have preferred seeing in Dead Space and Dead Space 2 is not having Isaac Clarke be the main character through all three games. I think his first story was great, and I really enjoyed seeing what happened with, you know, him realizing what would happen with Nicole and that the marker got to him. But like the way the first game ended, it really felt like it was a conclusion of Isaac's story. And because of the movies and the media that had already been released, it felt like the what are they called? The necromorphs and the marker really had started spreading throughout the existing colonies, and that they were just going to continue telling stories in that universe. I think part of the mistake is that because they focused so much on Isaac in all three games, that then it felt that they couldn't then build more stuff, more games, unless Isaac was the main character. And I really think they could have had Isaac in the second game, but either make him a side character that was assisting you, or you start playing as him, and then a la, like, you know, other horror movies where they kill off the main character in the first 5 minutes. They could have done that with Isaac Clarke, and then you take on the mantle of some other character and you live through his story. And I think that could have given Dead Space more flexibility to continue doing games that didn't revolve around this one character. And that way they could have told separate stories. So when they gave him voice, I really felt like maybe when they originally wrote the script that they didn't write it with Isaac in mind. But then maybe because of the popularity of the first game, maybe they were pressured to keep him in there. I don't know that for sure. You never know. But yeah, I'm kind of with Aldo and on Mike on the voice, where I understand why they did it, because they felt they could have done more with the world building, because then Isaac could comment on things. But at the same time, you lose that immersion where you don't feel like you are the character. I mean, Nintendo's been doing it for years with Link. You know, why can't they do it with Isaac Clarke? They could have just made him come out on TV screens and grunt while he's beating the shit out of things and breaking boxes and, you know, destroying enemies. But
I'd love to see him dismember Mario or dismember Mario or Kirby in Smash Brothers.
In Smash Brothers.
There you go.
With dismemberment, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. But I mean, like, I mean that'd be something I'd like to see. That might actually get me into Smash Brothers. Having an Isaac Clarke character with his cutter just shooting, just like dismembering him across the screen.
You know,
that's what he's saying about dismemberment, though. Is that's probably one of the coolest things is Dead Space is one of the unique gore kills that were in this game. Which I mean, they've had violent, gory games where it's like, oh, a monster like bit someone or ripped their head off or they go into pieces. But this one is very unique on like the details because of with the necromorphs and kind of like they have tentacles. Since it was like kind of like the Thing art style of like creatures sometimes. So like the kills were very unique, and then they had so many that can be done. So if people who like watching those like gore kills or people who like fatalities and stuff like that, I would just be like, you know, I'm gonna die and see how this goes, you know, just to see how it looks. And they did really gruesome, unique kind of kill stuff. And then I think they kind of like turned it up even more in the second one to try to like outdo the first one on the kills or the gruesome kills.
The laser drill, the laser eye thing.
Yeah.
The best one.
Well, it was
the way the whole needle. But I just love the way the whole machine just drives through his head.
I know, it's like, wait a minute, I missed the
Give me a break. I'm doing it to myself.
It's like, I can imagine we're all sitting there watching that scene and we're like, oh shit, and all those like laughing his ass off.
Like Rachel likes to watch me play. I mean, my wife likes to watch me play games with me, and then like we both saw that scene. We were like, our mouths just like dropped. Like, that's so brutal. Why can't it just be just the needle going through the eye? It's the whole damn machine. I was like,
that's one thing I think that's really what Dead Space did different compared to like other horror games, because we went through the renaissance of survival horror, in the late 90s, early 2000s, which was all psychological, which I love. I love the survival horror. What it did different is that, you think about horror at the time, you're getting like remakes of like slasher flicks, and, the running zombie craze became popular. Sci-fi fell by the wayside. It really did. Mm-hmm. So when Dead Space came out, you had body horror return, like, super 80s Cronenberg body horror return.
Cronenberg.
You had the return of space, somewhere other than Earth. It wasn't a personal story. It was out there. And, with the gore, with the dismemberment, it was so appropriately named after the studio, visceral, because you're experiencing this raw fear, and I think that's what really made it stand apart from all those things. It wasn't the creepy atmosphere was absolutely there, but it's because you knew around the corner this fucking horrifying monster was going to kill you or try to kill you. That's what really established Dead Space, and that's why that first game did so well.
Well, I think some
where
of
are you
the
going to run to outside is space. Outside is space. It's just as it's worse,
Yeah.
I think it's been a long time since, like, I would say like Silent Hill or something like that, Silent Hill 2, that I've actually played a game where I'm kind of like anxious or like, whoa, hold on, I really don't want to go around this corner, or I can hear something and I don't want to go. But I mean, the horror games have always had like scary stuff in it or scary sounds, but there was enough confidence to be like, okay, I could do this. And this is one of the few games where it's like, I kind of got that fear again. I'm like, oh man, all right, I don't know if I want to do this right now. So it kind of got me like really good most of the time.
There were two enemies that really did that to me in the first game. The first one was the wall meat, the one where it's like making that weird, creepy noise because you hear it before you see it. It's like, it's just this horrifying like squeal, and you're just like, what the hell is that? And you see it shooting out.
I have
these
plans
pods.
for the wall meat, man.
That was Frank's own face.
But it's shooting out these pods, and you're just and when you I don't know how many of you just tried to run past it. I did, and it has that insta kill where it blows, it just blows right through your head with these tentacles. And then the other one was the stasis necromorphs, because you see this long corridor and they just sprint at you and you're just like, oh my god, like that you tense up, or at least maybe in your first experience, not necessarily on subsequent plays because you're expecting it, but those visuals are amazing, and it's to me it's pretty creative. And I'm sure in some like obscure horror sci-fi books they've described similar things, but seeing it brought to a visual representation, it was just awesome.
So one of the things I want to bring up was I think they did a really good balance. So games at that time were also starting to fall into the using set pieces in order to create excitement, but they were not interactive, right? Like Call of Duty would have these huge explosions that you would see, but then you wouldn't actually participate in the events that were taking place. You just see these amazing set pieces. And what Dead Space did is they created some of those and made them like the first time you run into one of those damn tentacles pulling you down the hallway, and that's where you really learn about having to shoot at the yellow orbs on their bodies so you can take them out. That was the first time that happened to me, that I was freaking out. I was like, holy shit, how do I get out of this? Because you're used to a game like that where you can just kind of shake loose, but you had very little control, right? All you could do is aim your reticule and try to shoot those yellow orbs, or some of the other what was the other one? You had the action sequence where you had the giant monster that was on the outside of the ship. You had to shoot it with some kind of what was it? Was it harpoon cannon or something like that?
It was an asteroid. It was asteroid cannon.
It was an asteroid cannon. There you go. And like those set pieces, like they didn't wear out their welcome. It's not like you had to do that 4 or 5 different times throughout the game. You did it once and it served its purpose, and it showed you how terrifying these things could become. And so I think they were smart about the game moved at a fantastic pace. You had these high tense moments where sometimes you had 4 or 5 necromorphs in a room, or sometimes you'd be stuck in a small room and there'd be one, but because the room was so tight and depending on the type of necromorph you had in the weapons, you might get screwed, and then you'd have these huge pieces, but they were paced out at a nice rhythm where you never felt your game too much at once, and I was always going back and forth. So there's always a good amount of tension with very little relief in between. And I thought that was one of the great things they did was the pacing.
What I thought was amazing about that too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no cutscene.
Mm-hmm. Everything's in game.
Only in game the whole time. Right. And then I noticed that there might be maybe 1 or 2 other scenes where it's not, but the only times you cannot control Isaac was at the beginning where you're going to the Ishimura, and then at the ending where you get to the ending and it shows whatever that surprise ending is. But other than that, you always have control of the camera or you have control of him throughout the whole game, which I thought was pretty cool.
Well, and I think that's really important early on in the game where you guys get onto the ship and you're trapped inside that little area behind the window and you're watching your whole team be destroyed.
Yeah.
And you can move Isaac, but you can't do anything.
Pound on the glass, asshole. Be like, hey, behind you.
And it really creates that sense of lack of control and having no ability to do anything to help the people that are part of your team. You feel so helpless in that scene.
Yeah.
They could have just made it a cutscene,
but you don't have control of the situation.
Right, exactly. And so that's what leads to a lot of that tension. Or like when you're on the comms with people, you can walk around the room. I mean, I had it happen a couple times where I'm on comms and suddenly a fucking necromorph would pop out of a vent. And like, what the fuck? I thought I cleared this room. And I got the person on comms still talking to me because the game, doesn't know. And it was funny because there's like, oh, we need you to go fix this. And like, fuck you, I'm killing this motherfucker here. So it was cool. It was like Frank says, the name of the company or the developers is appropriate, Visceral, because that entire experience was visceral.
Even those minor details, like when you keep stomping, his breath gets more and more like out of breath, and like you just keep stomping on the creature. It's pretty cool. I like that.
You know what? And
that's a cool effect.
That's actually something I pointed out to Bobby when we were playing 3, is that they took a huge step backwards. Because the physics in the game, as far as what you can interact with in the environment, the first game, it was a lot. Second game, I'd say it was probably about as much, if not maybe a little more. But then the third game, all functionality with the environment was, all but nil. Like there are very few things you can just throw. Even with the corpses, you can't really stomp them the way you did with the first 2 games. And I mean, the development and the issues with 3. That was all EA studio interference, so that's not surprising. But that also made the world, the environment of the Ishimura and the sprawl very real. You're able to pick up all this stuff around you. It feels like more of a real place than just a set piece that you're moving through, as Bobby would say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's cool because it brings out kind of like that emotion out of you. So it plays off your emotion. Because I had moments where I was stomping on him like a way more, and it's like, hey, he's already dead. And it really is myself because I was like, oh shit, that was a close one. So like I kind of.
But the sound effect it made and everything, and then the crunch and the way the screen would react.
So
it made it all
him
more
losing his
satisfying.
breath and being like over exhausted from it is actually, I felt like, oh man, I barely like made it through this. I want to make sure this guy's dead or something,
Mm-hmm.
So that's what was really unique and tied in.
And then when you walked outside to your car, you were stomping around just like you're just finally found a dead bird and you started just smashing it,
swinging with your full flail, like oh man, those full flail swings are cool. I also like the what do you call it? I when I first came to one of the zero gravity scenes, I kind of thought like, oh okay, they're gonna just throw in this little zero gravity part just to like show that you're in space, and it's probably not going to be a big deal. And then of course it always returns, and they're always really well done though. Like it just I don't know how it feels like to be in space, but it has like a good representation of what I think it would be like to go floating around and jumping from platform to platform, And I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, I like the way they
pleasant,
improved it. What, you've been in space?
No, I'm just saying. Like, think about it. It's not pleasant. It's like constant darkness. It's cold all the time. It's a vacuum. You're in a vacuum. That's scary. It sounds scary.
Very true. I think they did improve on the zero G environments in 2 because you had like that Iron Man suit component to it as opposed to just launching yourself. And that felt more disorienting, which I think really helped with the immersion because you can literally do 360 in any direction, and sometimes I'd be like, wait, where the hell was I supposed to go? And I'm moving the controller, the mouse and keyboard or whatever, and oh yeah, that's right, I need to get that way. And then when you're getting attacked in 0G, you see the effects of kind of like the slower moving projectiles. You see them kind of floating towards you as opposed to just launching at regular speed.
And like the physics when you blast off or blast at a creature and then they lose that limb, that kind of spins off slower, or the thing that got the direct hit kind of gets projected or pushed further, faster.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, there are a lot of improvements in Dead Space 2. I think where, like we said, it really lost its direction was in Dead Space 3, and that's because it came really just more a pure action game. It lost a lot of what made 1 and 2 special.
Don't you fly around like X-Wings and stuff in part 3 or something?
That may have made it better.
I saw a video clip where they like the co-op players are just flying and stuff and just shooting.
Part 3 just felt like a run and gun to me. I mean, seriously, like it just rooms full of dudes, just make sure weapons well upgraded, just blast everything in sight. I mean, that's what it felt like to me. Part 3.
That was the reason why I put it down, because I started the first 5 minutes and then these guys run out and I'm like in a duck and cover system shooting dudes, and I was like,
Turned to Gears.
Yeah.
And I love Gears of War. Saying it's not. That's not what I want to play. I want to play Dead Space. So
yeah.
Well, that's really only in certain areas, and that was more to draw in like the Call of Duty action, fans and stuff like that. But I mean, you fight necromorphs. They just a lot of them are very human in appearance and stuff like that. Like, they just you're fighting necromorphs still primarily, but it's not the same.
It's just my attention span's really short, so they lost it right away from me.
But you're not the first one I've heard say that. I've heard some people say that they stopped playing Dead Space 3 because they're just fighting against humans in the beginning, and they weren't expecting that. And Frank and I, like I said, have played through a good chunk of it together, which, as much as I enjoy the co-op, it does take away from the stress or fear of the game because you're playing with another person, right? So Frank's always got my back and I always got his. And if one of us dies, it's because either we weren't paying attention to something or we blew ourselves up or something, And so that's usually the way we die. And but because you're playing with 2 people, you lose your fear. But I would imagine, like Aldo said, when you're playing through that game, there's really not a whole lot of tension in there. It feels like very much like a run and gun. Even when those areas where we're not having we don't have a duck and cover system, and there's necromorphs coming at us, the areas tend to be very much, compared to other Dead Space games, they tend to be very big and open, and the enemies don't seem very difficult to take down. So, and then we as characters, like I remember struggling in the original Dead Space as far as making sure that my health was always up. And in this game, keeping my health up isn't a big deal. I get hit once or twice and I still don't need to take any health kits because, it only knocked me down maybe a peg. So, I mean, it's not, to me, part of Dead Space 3 is it's probably the most approachable of the 3 games, but by doing that, they lose some of that tension, that fear. And that's not to say, and I don't think any of us are saying it's a bad game, because by no means do I think it's a badly made game. It's just not what we were expecting.
Dead Space game.
Yeah.
That's it. Just a bad Dead Space game. But I mean, it's fun. It is fun, but it's a bad Dead Space game.
So how about influences? What kind of influences do you guys see across the series in this game?
I think the most obvious is Aliens, because it is in space, and even with like the first game to the second game, you do see that escalation. It's that very isolated, very few small crew member. The second one, there's more action. but it is still has the heart of Dead Space in the second game. I mean, third game, like the same way Alien 3 is pretty much hated, I couldn't even say that for Dead Space 3 because it just lost its identity. At least Alien 3 is still an alien movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's your opinion. That's a different podcast.
I like that, Aldo.
I would think mostly like when you talked about earlier about the lighting and the atmosphere, that I really got a lot of that. Frank said it before, the Event Horizon.
Mm-hmm.
And plus the psychological part, whenever like you hear him Isaac hearing voices or like from part 2 and stuff like that, it kind of has that strong vibe from that Event Horizon, which I watched like I think the other day, so it was really cool again to watch again. I always love watching that movie; it's fun.
That's a great movie. I love it. I love that.
And that's
Event
like
Horizon.
psychological horror. That's really really cool.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that Event Horizon's a damn good game. How about you, Aldo? Well, movie. It would have made a damn good game.
Movie.
Well, actually, it does make a good damn good game because I really do. Well, you know what, Aldo, you go ahead and go first.
I'm sorry, but yeah, definitely influences, like for sure. Event Horizon, I felt a lot like because of the there was this there was also like that you kind of figure, even like leading up to it, you kind of figured there's like something beyond just like these, like they're not like alien or experiment type creatures. It's kind of like there's kind of like this hell aspect to it, you kind of get that feeling that it's like, that's why like it's heavily influenced by Event Horizon, and and like with Aliens, just with like its design and its engineering of the ship and everything. It's a mix of both, a real good mix of both.
Yeah, and I would think that it probably is more like a Event Horizon influence game because of the way the Necromorphs look, but especially because of the hallucinations that they're dealing with, the aspect of there being an alternate reality, or I guess a parallel universe. But even in the ship's design, like I know we keep coming back to Alien, but I really do think the ship designs are more inspired by the way the ship looked in Event Horizon. Then in turn, Event Horizon obviously was inspired by the way the ships looked, especially in that first Alien, the way the Nostromo looked. I mean, come on, I mean. One of the most terrifying scenes in that original Alien movie is when they're in the port area where they have all the chains dangling down. Like, who the hell has chains dangling down like that in a creepy ass old ship with no lighting? Of course, that looks terrifying, no matter what world you're in. And yet they have that there, and then they're just the way the ship is designed. It looks old. It looks archaic in some ways, and it makes you wonder. Is this how people would really be on a ship? I mean, you don't know because those things don't exist in real life. But I mean, like we said, the environments are terrifying, and a lot of that inspiration comes from movies like Event Horizon and Alien.
Yeah, and like one of the things is kind of like the stage designs for like the Dead Space. When you would walk into a room and see dead bodies or writing on the wall or like a skull. And it's kind of like Event Horizon where you just see that sludge of like mush on the wall and like skull fragments that are sticking there, and they're like, what the hell happened here? And they're trying to figure out the whole time what's going on. And it's kind of like that every time you walk into a Dead Space room. You're like, okay, this is a dead body. This guy's holding like a rail gun, and what the hell's going? What the hell happened here? You'll never know. You're not going to find out. But I mean, maybe with some of the logs and stuff like that, you can. But most of the time, your first reaction is, what the fuck happened in here?
Well, and I think those aspects are more influenced by Lovecraftian horror, because a lot of times you know in those stories you're a character who's following the breadcrumbs of other characters, and you're reading their things that were left behind. It's like, oh, he's writing this story, or this person wrote this story, and something terrifying happened to them, and you're reading about it secondhand, and then that character has their own experiences. And that's a lot with like Dead Space feels like too. There's obviously a lot of influences in this game. It's a combination of the Aliens thing and the Lovecraft thing, which again, going back to Event Horizon and Aliens, those things themselves were also influenced by Lovecraftian horror,
And just the creatures, I would say a lot were just a lot like the Thing, just kind of like the moldy, the way they're all gelatinous kind of looking. Or kind of, I don't know. So mostly creature design, I would think, is more like the Thing, but that's about it.
Every time someone mentions the Thing, I always think of the when they're all tied up to that one guy on the bench, on the chairs. They all tie together, and he starts he starts changing. I always like crack up at that scene. I'm just thinking about it right now. Sorry. Thanks.
Well, and again, I think
they go back to those classic things that are scary. So like they did the whole, you go to the nursery and it's like baby music. So,
Oh, in part 2.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, this stuff's like old school like tropes that they use, and it's like, but I'm freaking out now. Like,
Children were killed. It's taboo.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing. I mean, tropes are tropes for a reason. And I think what a lot of people forget is that a lot of those things are reused because there's always a new audience, and those things work. Isolation, it's like, oh, well, I've been by myself before, and, they should never make a horror movie or any game or any sort of media where somebody's by themselves. Like, to me, it's like there are overused tropes, but then there are tropes that work. And to me, Dead Space used all the tropes that work because of the way they executed them.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't anything new. They use elements from everything that came before it. Like the only thing that was really new was the story itself, which was more just the details, not necessarily the framework. But
right.
It's just with the influences that they used some of the best because they worked, and also they hadn't been used in a while, and they weren't really popular at the time, especially. So I think what else do we see? Because you guys mentioned Lovecraft, you mentioned Aliens, Event Horizon, The Thing, Cronenberg himself, but I think just kind of even just classic sci-fi too, as far as the space travel, and then of course the realism with modern. I'd say after 2000 they started to incorporate realism a little bit more. So yeah.
What I also thought was unique too was those because everything was always like zombies and infection or ghosts or something like that. And I actually thought it was cool that it's necromorph, so it's like they want dead bodies, like reanimating dead bodies instead of an infection or stuff like that everyone's so used to seeing. So I thought that was pretty unique that they threw that in there.
Yeah.
Well, and then how it put in the story that with the people with the marker, it makes them go crazy to kill each other so that they have dead bodies to take over,
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that was pretty badass, I thought.
Well, and again, like with Cronenberg style, especially the early body horror that he did, what makes it work in Dead Space is what makes body horror work and everything if done properly. The whole idea of body horror is your own body turning against you. And with this game, Dead Space, they took human people and made a monster. So when you got necromorphs coming at you, there are human aspects to them, right? That's why you keep going back to The Thing, Mike, because part of what made The Thing terrifying is like, okay, at the end of the Thing movie, that giant thing monster in the basement wasn't terrifying. I mean, because there's just a big amalgamation of all these things that you couldn't identify. But what made the head spider terrifying is because it was that character's head who you'd seen through half the movie, and suddenly you got these eyes popping out the bottom of his neck and these legs coming out of his head, and it's his head, right? So that's what makes the necromorphs terrifying, because you got these monsters with these giant claw arms, but that they got pretty human legs running at you. Or you can see aspects of their humanity still there because you knew they were once human. It's like that's what makes the baby one terrifying, because those babies actually turned into, like, you see them later on, you're like, holy shit, that's a baby, but it's a monster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it could have been people you have known, That's the part of that's scary too, It's someone like, fuck, I just had a beer with that guy last night. Like, oh man, like, oh man, he went home with that. Oh, that was a guy he took home. Oh man.
And then
this guy had a bad day.
I think also another really terrifying thing was from the logs, the audio logs and the text logs, is that its influence, even if you were alive and weren't killed, like, you were being affected by it. and there's like that creeping inevitability. You just have this force that's affecting you because you hear it, and they're like, "Did you hear the noises like in the shaft?" And like I had this sinking feeling in the back of my head and all this stuff. And it's like no matter where you go, if you're in the sphere of influence of the marker, you're gonna feel it. And whether it drives you insane, like it did in Extraction with what you saw there, or whether or not it just traumatizes you, like it's a horrifying thing that even just being in the proximity, you're screwed.
Yeah, it's that whole indoctrination thing, man, where you don't realize you're being brought into the fold and you're doing it happening against your will. So we talked a little bit about it earlier, but would you say these games, particularly 1, 2, and 3, still stand up with the current generation of games and the incoming generation? And why? Why do they still stand up, or why don't they?
1 and 2, 100%, because I could play it right now and enjoy it. And plus, it looks fucking amazing on PC. I know, man. I think the mechanics just works super well still. Like if you play part 2, if you want the one that has, because they did refine and like polish off like all the good stuff in part 2. But yeah, you can pick it up and play, and I think it compares really well to any type of horror game that's like now, or you'll, if someone hasn't played it from now, you could go back and tell them to play it. They could be like, oh, that's like on 360 and PS3. It's like, but I think it still holds up, and I think anyone who hasn't played it would be really surprised on what they're playing.
Yeah, I was like, I would like to go back and redo the first one again, like on PC. I do know, I think I know what to expect from playing a part 2 right now, because part 2 I truly believe does hold up very well. But I would like to see what on PC what could be done with like a game like part 1. Like Frank, did you say you played it, the first one on PC?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just like a straight port, pretty much, or I mean, what is there anything different that they've done from the 360 version to PS3 version?
No, it's a port. It's definitely the best
Just
looking.
increase resolution, obviously.
You just get higher frame rates and better resolution, which actually does make it look really great.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, I want to see how it looks at a higher res, which I kind of like have an idea that it would look amazing.
And with the first one, it does look nicer, but like Mike B said, the 2 holds up way better, just because it's just.
I figure it would.
It just, the amount of detail. I mean, they really put. I think it was like $100 million or something they poured into the budget for 2 or something like that, or like all the projects that weren't working at the time. So you can tell that with the amount of resources put in there, it still holds up really well. And I mean, as far as the PC goes, with the 7th generation consoles, it seemed more like that's what they were developing more first for, and then kind of PC was an afterthought. So I'm sure if they had done it PC first, it would have come out a lot better looking, or way more details or something like that, as opposed to just being ported.
And you guys could disagree with me on this, but how I feel about it is because I have, like, within the last year, went back and played 1 and 2, and this is how I feel, at least visually, on it. I would probably still even say Dead Space is one of the best looking games, like even to this day. That's not where, how we're in this age where it's like has to be like photorealistic.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those games where it's not, but it wasn't at that level at gaming yet. So I think it's still one of the greatest looking games that has, like, it looks like a game,
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a video game. It doesn't have to look like photorealistic, but it still looks really, I think it looks really beautiful. At least on PC, I've noticed that.
Yeah, I agree. I this push for photorealism, I don't necessarily think is a good thing. And we kind of talked about this before, as far as like indie games go, how as long as the gameplay is fun or the concept is good, it doesn't matter what the graphics look like. I mean, hopefully they're nice, but they don't have to be, super amazing. So like Guacamelee. Watch Bobby play that, and that's a very well animated game, and it looks really pretty.
It's very pretty.
And it's a simple Metroidvania. That's a 2D game. Whereas games that are photorealistic, like super high res, can still be garbage because they're just not implemented well. They're not executed well, I should say.
Yeah.
So, but
what was that? What was that big PlayStation release about the zombies? Came out last summer.
Order 1886.
No. Came out Days Gone. There you go. The huge push on that one. It looks like a really good game, but apparently it's not. There's still a lot of defenders for it, but it just seems like it didn't live up to what people were hoping for.
It even got me hyped, but for some reason, just when it came out, it's like I totally forgot about it and didn't care. It's like, oh, that trailer looks cool, and it's like, never played it.
Completely forgot till you mentioned it right now. That was the one with the flood of zombies, right? Where it was like constant flood.
That's all they showed you gameplay for like 2 years. Is like, oh look, we can render 400 zombies at once. Yeah, but is it fun? Or okay, so like graphics wise, the most recent example I can think of, Ghost of Tsushima, right? So graphically, Ghost of Tsushima is not pushing any boundaries. The character models are good. With the main game, they're not great. They look beautiful when they have the rendered cutscenes. But when you're actually playing the game, you can see graphically, there's some issues here or there. But the focus on that game is on the abundance of greenery, like the amount of greenery they have in the game, like the way the grass moves, the way the wind blows, the way the weather effects occur. But more importantly, and this comes in line with Dead Space, is the lighting. Like the lighting in Ghost of Tsushima is amazing. The way everything reflects and refracts. Like, I don't know if you guys seen any of the photos I've posted on the Twitter, and I've started having them come up in the chat on Discord.
Yeah.
Like it is a beautiful game. Graphically, is it pushing boundaries? No, but it's the way you build your game. And with Dead Space, particularly with the lighting, is what they did. The other thing, like I mentioned earlier, was the sound. The sound in that game and the lighting in Dead Space in 1 and 2, top notch. I can think of very few games that have done it any better than that one. And honestly, the other one that comes to mind is a space game, Metroid Prime on the GameCube. Metroid Prime is still a damn good looking game, and it's because of the way they use the lighting. Because when you look at the textures aren't that great, but the lighting's really, really good, and the sound is amazing. And that's the same thing with Dead Space.
That's my favorite. The sound in Metroid Prime series is fantastic. Yes. But yeah, I mean, like I agree. Graphically, I think Dead Space really is not in need of a remake or anything.
Yeah,
I would like to see a new Dead Space. I would love that, but
a re-release would be cool. But I mean, that's about it. It doesn't need to be remastered or none of that stuff.
Yeah, re-release. I doubt they'd ever do that. That would be cool, but I would love overall just to see a brand new Dead Space. But
so I mean, if not a need a re-release, then just if someone has a PC, just try to get a hold of it on PC, and it's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this kind of jumps into one of the questions I had on there. It's a little bit ahead, but we can talk about it now. So, Aldo, the question basically is, would you prefer to see it revived or continued, remade, re-released in its original form, or simply left alone? And you said you would like to see a sequel, or what would you prefer?
I would like to see a sequel. It's because I think I like this. I like the series the way it is. I wouldn't really, aside from part 3, I wouldn't really change much about it. But but part 3, what I would change about it though is like gameplay wise, story wise, I still thought part 3 was okay, But I would like to see a sequel. It could go off to like a different quadrant of space, like a new marker, this new markers discovered elsewhere, they could do more things with the Dead Space series. So I would like to see a full-on sequel.
How about you, Mike?
I would want to see a sequel, but this is a weird way to think about it, though. Is kind of like what I was saying earlier, like how everything's like super photorealistic stuff like that. I would love for them to just keep it simple, kind of like, hey, we got this old engine that we use to make Dead Space. How about we bring that back and work more on like what we can evolve as a gameplay or as how the map plays out, or add new characters or new techniques we could use now that are different from, what can we fit in this old game engine? Because I really don't have a desire to see it like become photorealistic and super high textures and everything like that. Maybe if like sound, if they improve like the sound quality, because it's already great, like with a new sound engine. But graphically, I actually just thought it was perfect the way it was. So, I mean, sure, maybe a more polish on it if they make a new game, but I don't really want to see it evolve into like that photorealistic type of look anymore, I wouldn't want to see that. Story-wise, I never finished 3, so I wouldn't know what I would want from a story, so. Or maybe retcon 3, I don't know.
How about you, Frank?
I'd really actually like a reboot, but not ignoring the events of the first 2 games, but maybe like an alternate Dead Space 2 where it is played from the perspective of a different character. Because I don't want them to continue the story the way it is, because slight spoiler if you haven't finished it, let's just say that the way 3 ends from what I've seen is very kind of final. So it is kind of a true trilogy. I mean, the details you should play through 3 just to get that closure. But there's not a really good way for them to continue the story without having to either, one, like Resident Evil 7 it and just be like, you know what, far away from everybody and everything, this is happening. Or just tell it from a different perspective. I mean, if they were to remake 1, and I wouldn't even say, necessarily make it photorealistic, but improve the graphics, I wouldn't mind that, honestly, if they kept everything else relatively the same, but just finer details, more, just more detail on the environment, on the necromorphs, on, Isaac Clarke, but, no HUD, no changes to the gameplay, maybe just slight improvements. Because honestly, I think 2 has the way better gameplay. Every issue that I had with 1, they fixed in 2. And that's more of what I would actually just kind of more prefer, like a sleeker 1 with 2's gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be hard because sometimes they fix too much detail and it kind of ruins things when they do stuff like that.
Like what? Like
visually, if they like try to fix or enhance details too much, it kind of makes things off-putting sometimes.
If they were to do like an
Remaster.
HD remaster, okay.
Yeah.
No, that's true.
That's what I'm saying. I wouldn't want an HD remaster. I'm saying like a remake, though.
Yeah, he's asking for
like, I'm talking about, like comparing like Resident Evil 2 to the remake of 2.
Okay.
No, that's what I would prefer.
But you would want the mechanics to be the same then, right? Or just have the refined of 2?
Yeah, because the gameplay itself is near perfect for what it is.
I kind of like the faults of the first Dead Space, like as far as like the mechanics, some of the mechanics and the way like the controls are and stuff, because it does kind of like add to that, like you kind of fumble around with it, like mid battle or like trying to do something. It kind of like adds to it, like you're kind of really in that situation. Like I'd be fumbling around like mad, like just trying to figure things out. But like
crap my pants, dude.
Well, it adds to that.
I would just crap my pants.
And maybe they'd stay like, dude, this guy just shit his pants. Back up. This guy, it's like some necromorph. This guy's weird. This guy just shit his pants.
Well, I think because of the way Isaac controls it, adds to the fact that he's not trained in these situations. So that's why he is sluggish, and that's why he doesn't have good quick turns and things like that. And so, yeah, that's part of what adds to the tension. I mean, that's part of what people talk about with the original Resident Evils, where the tank controls made it more sluggish to move characters, so it made it a little more terrifying. But they found a way to still make that work in the RE2 remake and the RE3 remake. But again, I would also argue then, if they were to do Dead Space in the same vein as RE2 and RE3, it would not be the same game, because those games are still more action-oriented. They really would have to make it more, not quite to the extent of like an Amnesia style game, because those are straight up, you have nothing, you just are running away constantly.
Mhm.
But somewhere in between, there's got to be a soft spot in the middle of an RE2 remake and those survival horror style games of in the vein of Amnesia, where you can find a nice spot for Dead Space to fit in, and then upgrade its visuals while still maintaining those same aspects. But I mean, the reality is as much as I wouldn't want them to try to redo Dead Space, like, my worry is that if they were to reboot it, fans would be upset if they didn't then retell Isaac Clarke's story. And fans, some fans unfortunately need to get their heads out of their butts and understand that, this game does not have to be about this one character, right? There's a reason why they already created this whole universe. I mean, in 3, they establish, right. In 3, they established that the markers have been around for at least 200 years. So you have this huge window of time in which you can explore all these different kinds of stories about the Dead Space universe. So I just think it's just a matter of getting the right team who understands what made the first 2 games good to then make a game in the series, whether it's a reboot, a reimagining, however you want to word it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it deserves more. I just hope, that if they do it, it's done right.
I like having my head in my butt.
Well, I mean, you do like
have you
crapping
ever
your
seen,
pants. So is that when you crap your pants when you have your head in your butt?
Or have you seen the first Puppet Master? I think it was the first Puppet Master.
Yeah, I've seen the first
Where
one.
the guy, where the guy tells the guy to go fuck himself, and he kind of makes him like go inside out or curve into himself. It was Wishmaster, not Puppet Master, Wishmaster.
Wishmaster.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah, a Puppet Master. That was one of those little dudes. I also like his Isaac Clarke's. I just wanted to interject in there. His little pelvic thrust thing he does when he tries to like show you where to go. That little line on the ground. How he just like
it's a pelvic thrust.
I'm just thinking about that right now.
Only Aldo would catch that.
Right now.
I remember doing that in like high school a lot. Whenever you told someone off, you always went to them like, "Oh, motherfucker," like that.
All right, so let's go ahead and start closing out here. So, the last major question. Well, we got 2 more questions. But, survival horror. Would you call Dead Space a survival horror? And Aldo, I'm going to start with you.
1 and 2, yes. I would definitely consider a survival horror. It's got literally all the same elements of a survival horror, where you're trying to survive, and it's frightening, it's scary, it's dark, it's cold. These are all things that terrify me, anyways. So in that aspect, I would consider it a survival.
How about you, Mike? Sorry, Aldo.
I was going to be. Go ahead, Aldo.
Oh, sorry. Part 3, no. It's just shoot. It just fuck everything up. That's it. We got weapons. We got guns. Let's go tear some ass.
With that pelvic thrust.
That pelvic thrust, like, after you like clear out a whole room of them, just, what's up?
All right, Mike.
Yeah, I know people I think a lot of people disagree with it being survival horror because of I guess those old school like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, the menu, the item management and stuff like that. That kind of like that's really the big aspect of you surviving is if you don't do that, you're not going to make it. Or avoiding creatures, like you had in like the first Resident Evil, I was terrible at it because I just sucked at like avoiding creatures or zombies.
Kill everything in sight.
Yeah, I was killing everything in sight, and it's like, bro, I don't have any bullets. I'm fucked. So I would understand that argument, but my quick answer would be just like Aldo. I mean, it's a horror game, and I struggle to survive, so it's a survival horror.
Yeah.
I mean, but I understand when other people disagree. Like that makes sense if you're thinking of like the traditional labeling, I guess, of what survival horror was for video games back in the day. But yeah, that I didn't really have a big long answer for that one.
Frank?
I absolutely disagree. And it's
I figured you would. I was waiting for you to disagree.
Yeah, that's me too.
Well, I mean, because survival horror is characterized as an emphasis on atmosphere with limited combat. The combat in Dead Space, even in the first one, is not limited at all. You have so many weapons. You have a store. Enemies drop. It has Resident Evil 4 syndrome, to where to me it's a horror action game, whereas Resident Evil 4 is action horror. Like Resident Evil 4 has an emphasis on the action, but it does have horror elements. Dead Space has horror. It's primarily horror, but it has action elements. It is not survival horror because you think about the games that you brought up. You have, like, in the game, there's a finite amount that you have. I mean, and that's kind of true for Dead Space, but with the amount of, you can find credits, you can upgrade anything to pretty much to its max so that you can blow anything away, even in the first game. And you have so many tools. You have kinesis, you have stasis. You don't even have to use weapons or ammo. You can just launch shit at the thing. And any game where you're being hunted, I wouldn't say is even survival horror because, like I said, survival horror has limited combat. You can defend yourself. So that, like, Amnesia and, even like Clock Tower and stuff like that, I wouldn't even consider for survival horror. That's what I call runaway horror, because the whole goal is just to get the hell away from whatever's trying to kill you, So that's the way I see it for Dead Space 1 and 2. You just you're really too strong for it to just simply be survival. Are there tense moments? Absolutely. But when you can carry like 10 med packs, your inventory has 30 slots, it just kind of loses that label for me,
Let's understand.
But yeah, I'd say, like, playing it on Impossible. If you're going to play it on Impossible and not upgrade anything, it's one hell of a survival horror. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's what makes it hard labeling it as one thing or another difficult, because there's some people who are going to play Dead Space and they're going to struggle with it no matter how easy it may be to others. And that's even at the normal settings, and for them it's going to be a survival horror game. While other games are going to be like, I agree with Frank in the sense that Dead Space, the first one is probably the one that comes closest to earning that survival horror moniker, but it still is more like a Resident Evil 4 than it is like a Silent Hill. And really, like, even the original Silent Hill wasn't that terribly difficult to get through. I think maybe Silent Hill 2 is probably more in line with the Silent Hill, with the horror, survival horror. But games like, even though Frank won't say a game like Amnesia survival horror because you're running away, to me those are survival horror because the only way to survive is to escape. What you're doing is you're trying to survive as best as you can. But again, this all comes back to the point of what is the definition of survival horror? Well, it's always changing, right? As more and more games come into horror, and especially games that we love and we think are incredible, they may be considered more survival horror. I mean, I just finished playing Alien Isolation. Alien Isolation is considered survival horror, and it has more limits than a Dead Space game, but at the same time, you do have a wealth of weapons to work with. So because you have a wealth of weapons, does that take away from its survival horror aspect? I don't think so, because you're fighting this enemy that's constantly chasing you that you can't kill. You can only make it get away from you, like in Clock Tower 3, right? You have that dude, or in Clock Tower 1 where you have the scissor man chasing you. And all you can do is either run away from him or use a tool to make him get away from you for a moment or to help you escape. And that's the case with Alien Isolation. But I've also heard the debate that some people say, well, it's not survival horror because you're fighting robots, or because sometimes you have to interact with people and you have guns and stuff. So I don't know. I mean, to me, it is Alien Isolation is survival horror. Dead Space is somewhere in between. It's more of a horror action rather than action horror. So, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of debate, but like Mike said, I'm not going to fight over anyone over what it is. My concern is, hey, do you enjoy it?
I had no idea this kind of an argument existed to begin with.
It does. It really does.
I mean, this is people who argue, I mean, it's video games, like, but it is. It's a hobby. The people are passionate about. I mean, here the definition according to Wikipedia: survival horror is a subgenre of action adventure, and horror video games that focuses on survival of the character as the game tries to frighten players with either horror graphics or scary ambiance. Although combat can be part of the gameplay, the player is made to feel less in control than typical action games. So, to me, that's what's it called? Like with Dead Space, you feel pretty in control. I mean, yeah, the first one you're a little clumsy and goofy, but once you get a hold of controls, you feel in control. You know, that's how it felt.
That's kind of a good progression, though. You think about it, of the Dead Space series, where like you're starting off, you're like you said, you're clumsy. You're kind of like trying to like figure your way out through this. Part 2, you're more seasoned. You know, you kind of have an idea of what to do now. Part 3, you're a badass. You know, it's like I've seen this before. Kind of like
Part 2 has that feel too. When you're like upgrading your armor stuff, it makes Isaac look more and more battle hardened each time.
That's really more the first one, because in the second one you have like the different style suits. That's where you have the Planet Cracker suit and the hazmat suit, and if they were going more for the skins because it's fucking EA.
I always go for the skins.
So anybody who watches this, please just comment down below. Is it survival horror or not?
I don't care.
Let us know what you think.
I don't care what.
Frank doesn't care. I mean, I personally don't. You like the game or you don't?
Like to me, survival horror on for the most part it's dead. Like it's just kind of evolved into two different things. You know, it's like more the action horror and it's more the disarmed horror, runaway horror, whatever you want to call it.
Like music genres, how it's just mushing into everything.
Yeah, pretty much. And I mean, that's okay. Like progression is good. Mm-hmm. It just survival horror doesn't really exist the way it did before. And, you know, it's because of technology and, you know, new gameplay elements and stuff like that. It's fine, but, you know, we haven't really had proper survival horror games in at least a decade, in my opinion.
Frank just wants you to label it right.
I don't care about labeling. I'm just saying that's what I think.
Okay, that's what Frank thinks.
That's what Frank thinks.
Well, it's just
that's okay, Frank. I tend to agree with you a lot, Frank. So it's okay.
It's really hard to define genres with video games because, okay, look at our open world games, especially with like Red Dead Redemption 2. I mean, how do you define it other than open world? Because there are aspects. There are aspects. It is a game that has missions that reflect different genres of gameplay. I mean, there are horror, you know, not EA. What the hell is it called? Rockstar Games with their GTA games have always had missions that have sci-fi or horror aspects or things. And of course, because it's especially with like Grand Theft Auto, everything's satire. But with like Red Dead Redemption, especially Red Dead Redemption 2, the original one was somewhat satirical of the Wild West, but the second one in particular is more of a much more romanticized version, which still has some of that satire, but they have some missions in there that are pretty horrifying. You know, either because you see the end result of something that happened, or you come across something that's very creepy or unnerving, and you can't explain it. So then, do we find that we can't define that as survival horror because it's not the main focus of the game? But I mean, that's kind of the point here, where games have the ability to be whatever they want, whatever they choose to be, depending on who's ever designing it. It doesn't have to fall into one genre. And that's what some of the horror games are doing, right? They're doing cross-genre things. They may have horror aspects, but they're not just a horror game from beginning to end.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
go ahead.
It's an open world game, you know, like they can dip their toes in pretty much anything. So, you know, like, what is it? Fallout New Vegas, where it has those mission, like where you're fighting those people who are mutated and you don't have a weapon and stuff like that. Like,
yeah,
it's got
blood money.
Yeah, blood money. There you go. But
like, blood money is pretty terrifying because you feel almost entirely powerless in that one, and that's different from the whole rest of the game. And that's a DLC pack for New Vegas, and it is really, really good. But it's tough, and part of it is because you feel so powerless trying to get through these ghost-like characters that keep coming up, and you can't really, you know, kill them. All you can do is dissipate them and try to run away from them. So it's really tough. So, I mean, in that respect, maybe that DLC is considered survival horror, even though the whole game itself is an open world game.
Yeah. I mean, and I've said it before, is that, like, I don't really care when games really try to do that. It's like, you know, it's not necessarily stick to what it is you're focused on. You know, like, that is a cool thing, but it's not something that's going to be like a draw for me. You know, it's like, oh, well, Metroid, what was it? Fusion, like, that one had a really creepy atmosphere and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, that's not really why I would want to play it, though. Like, if I'm going to play a Metroid game, it's because I want to play the platforming and the shooting and the puzzle solving and stuff like that, not because it has a creepy atmosphere. So, I don't know. I like, it's more just kind of stick to your lane when it comes to that stuff, as far as my interests go.
I had like a really good question for you guys though. If you could get that remaster or an HD remaster or a remake or reboot or a sequel or continuing on, what do you think would be a good developing team? If you just had a thought. If you don't worry about it.
I'm trying to think of like horror studios that are, you know, prevalent right now. I mean, it would probably have to be an indie studio at this point, because I can't think of any AAA studio that wouldn't make another Dead Space 3 style game as a remake, you know?
Hmm.
I was
That's a
asking
good
you guys
question.
because I couldn't think of anything.
I can't do it.
I can't.
I was just wondering if you guys could.
If Mike had his way, everything would be made by Platinum Games. That's what it would be.
Oh my god! Could you imagine a Platinum Games or Dead Space but done by Platinum?
All the tood and all the awesome one-liners.
Oh,
all the
And
man.
Isaac
guns.
shoots his plasma and he's
all
like
like,
spinning a zero G at the
I don't
He
know.
just puts
Maybe
it behind his back through his legs like
that's
a
a
love
good
gun.
question.
I can't think of an American studio, but I'm playing Fatal Frame 4 right now, which was the one that was released only in Japan on the Wii. Tecmo is usually pretty good about the way they do their horror games. I mean, Tecmo might be able to create the atmosphere in that kind of game. I don't know gameplay wise if they could do it, because theirs tend to be more plotting and slow. And Dead Space isn't quite like that, but I think for the atmosphere they could probably get it right.
Probably.
Because I mean,
Do
they're.
you think that'd probably be better for HD remaster or a remake than they would a sequel then?
I would give them the challenge of doing a sequel. The thing is, it's because since they're a Japanese studio, you know, they have different tastes, and obviously Dead Space was done from an American perspective. So I don't know how well it would work out. I mean, I don't think it would hurt, but right now, Tecmo, Visceral?
Yeah. Were
Oh,
they
you know what?
American?
Maybe they were
They're
based in
Canadian,
Canada. I'm really not sure. Well, it's part of Westwood Studios from EA, and I don't know where
Somewhere
Westwood's
up
located.
north. It might be north area.
No, it was American. Yeah, it was American.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's just
Well, the studio's based in America. Whether whoever directed it, I don't know if the guy's American or not. But all I know is the guy who
How about
created
the-
and directed it left the studio, and he created another studio called Sledgehammer Studios after the original Dead Space was done. So he didn't even work on 2 or 3.
What about Guerrilla Games?
What has Gorilla done? That name sounds familiar.
They were I think I got it right. What's Horizon Zero Dawn? I think
Oh yeah, they do Zero Dawn.
Zero Dawn and the Killzone series, I believe. Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
Killzone.
they did Killzone. I don't know. I never played Horizon Zero Dawn, even though I have a copy of it. Hey, CD
I have a copy
Projekt
of it
Red.
too, but-
CD Projekt Red is done with what is it called? Cyberpunk. Maybe they can do.
Cyberpunk.
Now they can do Dead
Yeah, they're not
Space.
done with Cyberpunk. No.
no, because they're already working on the multiplayer and they're doing DLC. So
Yeah, that's true. Well, when they're done, then they can do Dead Space.
honestly, I don't think that they'd be good for that. They're way better at, you know, open world games.
Oh, what's the name of the studio
That's a
that did Metro? The studio that does the Metro series.
Oh yeah.
Because that's good. That's more in line with what we've seen with like Dead Space. I just can't remember the name of the studio.
I'm looking it up right now. 4A Games. It's published by THQ. Wait. Hold on.
Deep Silver.
No, it's not Deep Silver.
No, it's
Does Deep
developed by
Silver make
4A.
Yeah, so 4A is the developer. Deep Silver may have published it.
Yeah, they published it.
Yeah.
But they're a Ukrainian studio. So
Right.
actually, that wouldn't be bad, especially with, the kind of atrocities that the USSR did with cosmonauts.
They can do Dead Space
They even have a
1984.
It'd be Dead Space based on actual.
They have a good understanding of it. It's based on yeah, exactly. They could do like a laser, like a full on laser scan of inside Chernobyl.
All right, so last question then, and the most important question of the evening or late afternoon. Favorite Dead Space game, Frank?
One, by far, just atmosphere. What a hell of a debut, for a franchise.
Hang on, let me stop you right there. Let's get the consensus from everybody. So, Mike, what is your favorite Dead Space game?
1.
All right, Aldo, you already said it. You said 1.
One, I kind of sucked off one really well.
So we're all in agreement that our favorite is 1. So go ahead, Frank. Your reasoning.
It had the best atmosphere. It had the best practical, application of the tools and, being in space, the claustrophobic atmosphere that Aldo said. The supporting characters, they had purpose. The still has the best enemy design out of the whole franchise, in my opinion. And that's another thing too, is that whenever you go to a new area, it's a new area, it still has that cold feel, but when you went to hydroponics, where you have to fight the Leviathan, and when you go to the, what's it called, where we first introduced to the baby necromorphs and stuff like that, it's all very distinct, minus the transition areas. But how much are you really going to expect for a change in a transition area when in this deep space freighter?
Yeah.
So I still prefer to play 2, just gameplay wise, because it's just more fun to play. They improved the action, they improved every complaint I had about the weapons in the first game, they improved on. With the alternate fire for the pulse rifle. In the first game, he sets it down and it does a 360 shooting, which has it doesn't do damage even if it's fully upgraded. So even if you're surrounded, it doesn't do shit. They changed it to a grenade launcher for the secondary fire in the second game. Perfect. The force gun, it would shoot out this force ball that would bounce in the first game, which made no sense. But in the second game, it was a concentrated force beam, so stuff like that. I just really love the improvements on the weapons. But no, just 1 was just so much creepier. It really was a horror game. It was just terrifying. You're lost in deep space, and there's all these horrible, hellish, monsters that are after you. So, I mean, 1 wins without question.
Mike B, anything to add?
Frank listed everything that's really great about it. The only thing I'm going to repeat what I said earlier too is, if someone hasn't played it today, or you can even go back and play it again if you haven't in a long time, and it 100% holds up. And if you haven't played it before and you play it now, I almost guarantee you'll love it if you're into the horror style games, and you would end up playing part 2, and you'll get sucked into playing part 2 right away. And if you don't, go fuck yourself.
That's a nice introduction. Hey, how's it going? Nice to meet you. Go fuck yourself.
Aldo?
Yeah, I mean, everyone else is listed. It's to me, and on top of everything, to me, it's just so full. It's so claustrophobic. I mean, there's nowhere you can really escape to. It's it's fight for your life. That's it. And part 1 does it almost perfectly. And and that's why I really love part 1. It's just you have no choice but to fight to survive. It's a great game. An atmosphere.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what sells me on 1 is, like I said, the lighting and the sound create a perfect atmosphere. I think 2 does improve on those things and in every possible way. But there's just something about that first one between the silent protagonist, finding everything on your own, the unknown, probably because of that first playthrough. When you play Dead Space 2, you've already been through Dead Space 1 more than likely. I know some people who pick Dead Space 2 as their favorite is because that's the one they played first. Then they went back and played the original Dead Space. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think Dead Space 2 is a great follow-up to Dead Space 1. But I think part of my reason why Dead Space 1 is my favorite is because it's the first one I played. And just that experience stuck with me, right? I have more memories about Dead Space 1 than I do about at least the half of Dead Space 2 I played. And that doesn't take anything away from Dead Space 2. It's just, that's just my favorite. It's like I always tell people when I compare games like this, it's like comparing Godfather 1 to Godfather 2. You can't go wrong picking whichever one is your favorite. They're both incredible movies, but if you pick Godfather 3, fuck you, get out of my life. So.
But it has that really good thing too. It's like, I really wish I could get my first experience again.
Yeah.
For Dead Space.
For Dead Space, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Although I was thinking a different first experience.
I wish I could take that back as well.
But yeah, because that first experience you have with it is just, it's really cool, I wish I could get that again.
Yeah. I honestly kind of felt it a little bit again because I'd forgotten about some of the chapters when I replayed it this summer, and I was like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about that part.
Yeah, you're right. That's where the replay value comes in. You're right.
Where, what's his name? The doctor, the one with the devil goatee and mustache. He's like, subtly trying to send some of the necromorphs after you. Like, I completely forgot about that character, and he's a good one. Who, spoiler, if you haven't played it, you never even get his get to see his comeuppance proper, which kind of sucks, but at the same time, it's fitting, But just stuff like that, and just the environments. God, those environments are so well designed. Like, it's Dead Space 1 is just such a masterpiece. It really is. It's probably on my top 10 games that you have to play, in your life.
Do they have an art book?
Yes, actually, I do have both art books. I have the mini one because there was, and I'll send you this picture, Mike. There was an ultra limited edition for the first game, and it came with, let me look it up. I know it had a mini art book, the first hardcover graphic novel, the game, of course, I believe a lithograph. Have you guys ever seen it?
I've never seen it.
I've only seen I think it's part 2. They had the edition with the little rail gun, right?
Yeah, actually, it's a plasma cutter.
Oh, the plasma cutter, yeah.
I actually have it right here because I've taken out Dead Space 2 to play Extraction, but this is the Dead Space 2 one. It's not really impressive. It comes with the soundtrack, it comes with some stickers, and then the mini plasma cutter toy. Dead Space 3, actually, there was a dev kit set that came separate from the game, and it had a marker, it had a health pack, and then some promotional material, stuff like that. But with the ultra limited edition, sorry. Which, if you can find the ultra limited edition for less than $1,000,
whoa,
because they only made 1,000 pieces, and they was only available at press releases. And I was like, what? That's stupid. I hate when they do stuff like that. Okay, I can't really find it. Oh, and it came with the first movie. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. Only 1,000 are being produced. Man, stupid EA. Special packaging, the lithograph, art book, graphic novel. Oh, and Ishimura patch. So I actually have most of all that stuff minus the patch and the lithograph, but I don't really care about that. But yeah, they came out with some really cool merchandise. Like I never got any of the NECA toys, which I really regret now because those things are in the hundreds of dollars. Even just when they were originally released, they're like $25. Now it's $150 for a Necromorph, and like they came out with an Isaac Clarke one, which is really expensive too. Yeah. So unfortunately, I'm pretty sure this franchise is dead for the foreseeable future.
And at one point, it was thriving, and then it literally just disappeared.
I think it's really just because 3 killed it. 3 just killed.
3 did kill it.
It didn't. Well, I don't even think it sold 1 million copies.
I mean, like that. Three killed him, but you got to remember too that they invested a lot of money in part 2, and it did not sell through the way they had expected. And they went ahead and went forward 3, which is why they made it more in line with what other popular games were doing at the time. But again, it didn't sell as well as it sold worse than 2. And so that's what ended up killing it. They figured fans didn't want it anymore, which, might be true because of the way they went, it wasn't as good. And again, this is where I come back to the fact that, that first one was so good, but it was to see Isaac Clarke come back in 2 was a little surprising to me. I think if they had gone more the route of just trying to tell stories within the universe, they could have left themselves more open. But I think if they're going to bring Dead Space back, they need to bring it back on a smaller scale. Maybe either do a smaller game, or maybe start bringing it back in other media, like maybe do another movie to test the waters, see if it's popular, and then maybe release some kind of like what do you call it, like a digital only game that's maybe 5 or 6 levels that does some of that gameplay to gauge how much people still like it, and then go forward from there. But I don't work at EA. They wouldn't like my ideas anyway, because it's not about making them all the money. So
like Visceral,
you wouldn't talk to us if you
get out of here. And then Visceral is gone.
Yeah, and Visceral's a good studio, man. I mean, they did Dead Space, and then no, I know, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's too bad that they're gone, but they gave us 3 awesome games.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea, like what you said about making kind of like a different story per game, kind of like the American Horror Story series, where it's like it's a different story per episode, per series. I mean, per season, but it's all in the same universe.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say a different story for each game, but they're all played by Isaac Clarke.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a completely different story for each game, but in the same universe. Different characters, everything, each game, but in the same universe. That would have worked.
Yeah, I think it would give them more freedom.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
All right. Well, you guys have any final words before we close it out tonight?
No, I think we said and kind of hammered home multiple times what makes this series so great.
And just a reminder, just comment below what you think, if it's a survival horror or not. Love to hear
We're going to get so many thumbs down on this episode.
Also hit that like and subscribe.
That's fine.
And hit that bell button.
Make sure to edit that out, Mike.
Thank you. I mean, thank you for having me my first time here. I hope I was able to add anything to it. I had fun. I had fun with you guys. Thank you.
I will say you added what I wanted and just a bit more, Aldo. Thank you.
Yeah, just
awesome.
Now, we appreciate you having me here, man, and we look forward to seeing you in future episodes. As usual, Mike B and Frank, it's a pleasure chatting with you guys as always. Thank you, everyone who tuned in and watched this episode, and we appreciate the views and the support. Thank you guys for coming in tonight. I appreciate it. We'll see you guys on our next episode. Bye. Did you pee a little? From all the laughing? It's alright. It was totally worth it. So what do you think? Should Dead Space make a comeback? Does it need to be remastered? Should 4A Games, the makers of the Metro video game series, take a crack at it? If not, then who? So many questions and so few answers! What we know for sure is that Dead Space left a permanent mark on our soul, one that will forever have us coming back to the series over and over. Between its impressive lighting system, immersive sound effects, nail-biting gameplay, and engrossing story, it's no wonder this series continues to be used as inspiration for newer games while also supplying content creators plenty of motivation for yearly retrospectives, especially during the spoopy season. Well, thank you for tuning in. Last time, I did say Star Wars would be our next episode, but I made myself a liar when we decided to release this episode in time for Halloween. However, I promise that the next episode will definitely be Star Wars! Peace!
This episode of the Obsessive Compulsive Gamer Podcast was produced by Bobby, edited by Mike B, and hosted by Bobby. If you would like to know more about the music used in this episode, please check the link in the description. Thanks for watching and listening. Check out our website at ocgamer.org for more episodes and articles on gaming.